listening to the Falconry Podcast with Ben Woodruff. Hello, everybody. Ben Woodruff here with the Falconry Podcast. I'm here today with John Griggs.
Hello, everybody.
And John runs the Falcon's Ledge YouTube channel. John, if you want to tell them a little bit more about your channel.
Yeah, I do flight sims, flight sim hardware, and even a little bit of falconry here and there.
It's a good channel, so show them some love. Everybody go ahead and check out Falcon's Ledge. John and I were chatting tonight, and we were talking a little bit about trapping, which is obviously something I'm very passionate about. I think that trapping birds of prey and flying them, hunting with them, training them, working with them, and then setting them free later is really kind of the core of what falconry is. That's how it started. And even though it's branched out into so many different things, falconry is really at the core of what trapping is at the core of what falconry is. And I wrote a book on the subject, Trapping Essentials. You can check it out online if you want. But I just... when John and I were younger, a lot of these stories we were talking about it like 20 years ago.
When we were younger.
Back in the day.
It is 20 years ago. I mean, it's getting up there.
Yeah, like literally some of this stuff is getting dated back there. And what's kind of fun about that is the internet has really changed a lot of things. But at the time, there really wasn't a lot of information on trapping, and you kind of had to earn it yourself. Your sponsor would help you some, but there was a lot you had to learn. And there were falconry books out there, but there just were no books on trapping, and that's why I wrote Trapping Essentials. It's just basically I wrote the book that I wish I had access to. I wrote what I felt needed to exist, just the basics on how to get yourself a bird, and kind of some of the tricks of the trade that I learned. And we even a couple of the stories we want to share tonight are in there. But it's really strange, though, because the human mind has pattern recognition. And if there's something that is unfamiliar to us, our brain tries to fill in the gaps and tries to make sense of what it sees. And trapping a bird of prey, trapping a raptor, is not a normal human behavior. Very rarely does that happen. And so people who happen to see you trapping don't know what you're doing, and their brain fills in the blanks, sometimes in very strange ways. So
yeah, they either don't see you at all, like you're completely invisible, the trap is completely invisible, even, the trap gets dangerously close to vehicles or something because they're just not paying attention.
Totally oblivious.
Or you're a Russian spy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really one or the other. Usually after everything is explained, it's like, oh, well, that's really cool, But
until
still,
that time,
it's one or the other.
Yeah. And because they don't know, usually people will not come up and engage you and say, hey, what are you doing? Instead, they just look at you and call the police or something,
Yeah, especially when we were doing some of these stories right after 9/11.
Yeah, it was bad. If you're just walking out into a dirt field or with a ball chatry trap to put under a red-tailed hawk, I couldn't believe after 9/11, after the 9/11 attacks, like I can't tell you that year how many people would pull over and just scream and swear bloody murder at you. They would just scream and yell and yell and yell, and they're like, "You terrorists!" What? I'm like, I'm a random dude walking with a cage with a rat inside out into a field. Why are you thinking that? And it's just because it was unfamiliar, and because people were so amped up and feeling nervous and uneasy in general, that anything that seemed unusual or suspicious, they just freak out about.
Yep.
It was a weird year. It was, to say the least, in every way, but even in falconry. And it's interesting, years after that, one of my apprentices, I had showed him the ropes, taught him how to go trapping, and him and one of his buddies went out to go after red-tailed hawks. And they had a ball chatry trap, which is, basically a cage with nooses and a rodent inside. And they had all their permits in place. They were all being legal. They went out, they saw a red-tailed hawk, and they did a walkout setup where they walked out of the car, put it under a pole, got back in the car, drove away, and almost immediately the hawk jumped off, dove down, and got caught. Well, just a few minutes later, the police arrive after they had caught the hawk and were getting things taken care of. And the police officer said, "Did you just shoot a bald eagle with a crossbow?" And they're like, "What?" And they're like,
"That's a little excessive."
Yeah. And some lady driving by saw them walk out with the trap, drive away, and then the hawk dive off the pole, and her brain interpreted that as those kids had a crossbow and they shot a bald eagle, and the bald eagle fell off of the pole. It's like, no, it was a red tail diving off a pole on a legally placed trap that was totally fine and legit, and the officer was just fine. It's like, oh, okay, I see you got your permits in order, and I don't know much about that, but okay. Was totally fine with it, of course, as well they should be. But that lady's brain interpreted that whole scene as kids with a crossbow shooting a bald eagle. It's crazy.
Wow. Well, with my Kestrel, I did very frequently get asked, is that a baby eagle? So pretty much everything that people see is an eagle, unless, they're a birder or a falconer or something like that.
Yeah, it's an eagle unless other... I've even had people say that about owls. They'll be holding a great horned owl or a barn owl. They're like, is that an eagle? It's like, no.
Yes.
Although the weirdest one I got was when I was a very, very young apprentice with a red-tailed hawk, and this nice old lady came up to me, saw this hooded red tail, and she goes, "Oh, is that a chicken or a bird?" And I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that. He's like, "No, it's not a chicken. No, I mean, yes, it's a bird, but a chicken is a bird also." So if you're not familiar with it, falconry is like the world of Harry Potter. There's all these muggles who are unfamiliar with different terms, and they're unaware that there's all these birds of prey living right in their neighborhood, and you just have to understand that.
Or the birds of prey living in their neighborhood are evil devil birds that carry away things.
They're kidnapping birds from my bird feeder.
They do. They do that.
Well, it's funny too, because you can go all over the place looking to try to, like, okay, I'm going after this species. This is my goal, is to trap a fill in the blank and not find what you're looking for, and then bam, it's right in front of you. Like one time I was so fun. I had been out trapping merlins with no luck. I got home and I had been hunting so I went out, hunted my Harris hawk on jacks, got home, and had gone trapping after that, no luck. And now I was just finishing up some exercise flights just in my front yard. And all of a sudden, this giant Richardson's Merlin, biggest Merlin I've ever seen, comes and starts dive bombing my Harris hawk right in my front yard. And I'm like, I've been looking all over for one of these all day. My trap's still in my car. So I just tossed my Harris hawk gently in my front room, and she lands on the couch. And it's a Harris, they put up with stuff like that. Ran to my truck, grabbed my trap, put it out with the bait in the front yard, and instantly just bam, she was on it instantaneously. And it's like this is right at sunset too, so it's like she was like, I'm gonna go be a jerk to a Harris hawk for my last thing before I go to bed. What? And she was a good pigeon hunter too. She ended up being a really good bird, but it's like you just never know what's going to happen with trapping, and sometimes you try so hard, but sometimes birds are really easy to catch.
Yeah, like the ones in Kestrels in Arizona. And, we did have a little bit of that here. But, Kestrels in Arizona, at least in the years that my wife and I lived down there, they were absolutely insane. You would put a trap out, and so usually we'll either stop and walk the trap out, which this actually brings me a little bit of a tangent on this, but the one thing that people don't always understand about trapping that I learned from you was the art of a setup, right? A lot of falconers will say, we'll just take the ball trappery and throw it under the pole where the kestrel is. You can catch kestrels that way. You can catch red tails that way. A lot of times they will still come out, but you'll catch them a lot faster if you do a walkout on the other side of the road. Because if you look at what these birds usually do, they do look down and they do go straight down on things, but they like to go horizontally, right?
And there's an art to knowing how close can you get with them being not likely to spook. If it's a city kestrel, you can get a bit closer. If it's a farm road that hasn't had a car in a half hour, you got to be a little further down. Yep. Yeah, you have to look, where are they looking? Are they looking down? What angle? Yeah, everything. Yep. It's all an art.
And these are things that I've learned both through experience, but also because I had a sponsor that was crazy about trapping, and I think it's awesome because I also enjoy it. But here we are in Arizona. This is a place that I had never lived. I grew up in Utah. I had lived there pretty much my whole life. All of my trapping experience was in Utah. And I remember many days, late season trapping or mid-season trapping, throwing a BC out there and just waiting forever for this one bird to come down that you wanted to trap.
With no luck. And
no luck.
Even in the cold. It could be like freezing cold and you're like, what is your deal, bird?
The rodents are all cuddled up in the corner, or maybe you got a hold of some sparrows and they're just huddled up together and they don't want to move around or whatever. Mm-hmm. But so I take my wife out trapping for the first time. I hadn't really done falconry because we had just got married. We just were getting settled and everything. But here comes this first season. I really wanted to give her an experience. And so, I'd done kestrels for years before that. So I'm going to do it again. So I build this BC and I get some sparrows, or it was a mice. We just got mice.
Yeah.
And we're driving around and there's kestrels everywhere. I mean, it's winter in Arizona. A lot of them winter down there. We're in the middle of farm country. So they're just everywhere. And I'm like, okay, pull over on the side of the road. And I'm like, I think I'll just try a toss out this time. So we pull forward off the road and I just kind of flick the trap out in front of the car, and then she's going to put it in reverse and back up. She's watching the bird, and the moment that the trap leaves the window, it hadn't even hit the ground, and the kestrel was vertically diving down on it.
Right on
and so she just turns the car off. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, it's already coming.
Because she didn't know any better. She hadn't been trapping before.
She just saw it move towards the trap, and she didn't want to spook it. So she intelligently turned the car off. And so here we are like 10 feet from this kestrel, and it gets caught on the trap.
Instantly.
So we hood it and we sock it. We're like, well, this one looks like it might be a hag. Because it's hard to tell. It was maybe November, so they had already gone through that partial molt of their upper feathers. So you didn't have all the little speckles and things that make it really easy to tell when it's a really young bird.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, we'll get it with another one. We'll compare the two. We'll see which one looks more passage, and we'll just keep that one, all right? So we go to catch another one. Well, this time I did a walkout, and the moment that I had turned away and put 5 feet between me and the trap, the kestrel was already on its way. So I just kind of quickly ducked off behind a cholla and watched this kestrel get caught. I mean, it was 10 feet from me.
It was like instantly.
Here I am exposed in a bright white Arizona Falconry Association t-shirt. I'm watching this thing get caught. It was great.
That's so weird, too, because you just never know what it's going to be. And it's so strange that you can have that, where some of them just are like, hey, absolutely no hesitation, and it's just textbook. And, there are some people that go through days and weeks of trapping before they nail it. And there's some people where it's like, hey, you just go out and bam, instantly like that. But that's pretty extreme, where some of the birds will do that, but kestrels, that's pretty extreme to just be like, hey, no hesitation whatsoever. The second it leaves the vehicle, they're on it.
Well, it's weird because we trapped 4 of them that way.
Man.
With just toss-outs. We didn't even walk out. We didn't do a good setup. We didn't even think out. We just threw it out underneath the bird and caught it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, pull off the road up here. And I just kind of reach my hand out the window and I throw the trap onto the hood, turn the car off. We caught that kestrel too.
That's so cool.
So it was this crazy experience. And then later on, we caught 2 kestrels on the same trap right at the same time. So that was fun too. So it was just like this experience of trapping that was completely unfamiliar to me, completely foreign. This was south of Phoenix. It was kind of between Phoenix and Tucson. The area that I was trapping was called Coolidge, which is a farm town that had a population of about 2,500 at the time that I lived there. So it was a lot of fun. I should have immediately started wanting to hunt Harris's. I did that the next season, but I guess
that's such a cool intro for your wife, though. She's like, oh yeah, falconry is fun. Trapping is great. It's like, it's not always as fun.
Yeah. Well, it was actually a lot harder with the Harris's because there's sentiment there. A lot of people feed them. Sometimes they are in areas that are kind of tough to. Like, we went down and found some near this. I think it was a sewage plant, and I put a trap out, and just the same as normal, adults came around, screamed at it, then juveniles came flying in, and we trapped one bird. There was 3 birds that were near the trap, but one bird got caught and the other 2 spooked away. This bird had half of its feathers that were completely singed.
Dang.
What it had done was that there was this like flare at the sewage plant, and I guarantee you that it had flown near that flare and just completely singed its feathers. And we took pictures of it. I can send those to you so you can put them up. But we there was not much we could do about it. I mean, it was obviously being cared for by its pack. One interesting thing about Harrises that you just don't find with other species is this mentality where they will care for birds that would otherwise die. I mean, this bird, there's no way that it could compete like other birds could, because half of its
survival
feathers
of the
were
fittest.
singed.
It's not the fittest.
It's definitely not the fittest, and but it's with this group that's caring for it and giving it opportunities. So.
Well, that's why I like. There's a lot of surprising number of mutations in Harrises where like they'll be missing toes and they'll have come into the world that way. It's not from an injury. Like first years that just happen to be missing a toe or 2, and it's like, okay, you would be dead. You normally don't see that with other raptor species, but a Harris, because they're looking out for each other in that way, because they have a pack, you can survive and still pass on those traits.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So that was the kind of a different experience there, but those were my experiences trapping in Arizona.
Well, and kestrels are a crapshoot, I think, depending on where you're at, because you and I have trapped them a lot here, and sometimes you wait, for hours, and some, to try to have any luck, and other times it's like piece of cake. But one of my favorites was I used to, way back a long time ago, this is even before I met you, I was running this brand new pet store. And right behind, outside, out back of our employee door, there was a huge hill. And I took some trash out to go put in the dumpster, and I look up on the hill, and way up on top of the hill on a big old house, there's this kestrel, and it's hunting the hill. And I'm like, I wonder. And there's a big old cement fence, with little, posts in between, big old, cinder block posts. And I went back in, it was a slow day, and I'm like, hey, to the staff, I'm like, you guys want to see me catch a falcon? They're like, yeah, sure. When are we going? I'm like, well, right now. Went out to my car, got my ball chatry trap, put a gerbil inside from the pet store, put it out on the cinder block post, and instantly that kestrel came down, got caught, and there was, whoa, wow, let everybody see it, and then we turned around and set it free instantly, and took the gerbil inside. It didn't know what was going on. And it's like, it's crazy that when you're not trying to get a bird, how easy it is to find them or trap them. And when you are looking, you're going after something specific, you don't have luck. Kind of a pain.
That's kind of Murphy's Law of trapping.
It is. You got to sacrifice to the trapping gods or something.
Like, I'll see prairie falcons all the time, but when we're out looking to trap one, we had never seen one.
The best, though, has got to be the pelican story. That was...
Speaking of prairie trapping.
Speaking of looking for prairies, this is a fun one. We were going out looking for prairies. This is December or January, very into trapping season, and I think we're trying to get you a prairie, right? I don't know. It was for one of us. It might have been for me.
It was for you because I was an apprentice at the time.
Okay. So we were going out for prairies, late season prairies, and we went out by the Lee K Center, which is this gun shooting range. So there's
the dump. It was the dump.
Yeah. So there's the dump. And the Lee K Center, and all these waterways, all these like little wetlands areas that are all butted up against each other. And so we're out there looking, and we're like, okay, cool. So you always see wildlife. You usually see peregrines out there. And we're out looking, and looking. And then we're driving along. This was your truck. And we look up ahead. And there's this giant American white pelican. Like, it wasn't walking. It was moseying across the road. And it just had kind of like this pretentious look on its face, like, what? And we're like, why is there a pelican it's the middle of winter, like the water's frozen, what, you can't eat any fish, like, why is it walking? Aren't pelicans
its wing did look weird, but it still looked like it was fine. It was just kind of walking around.
And we're like, okay, Good for you. But and I usually don't see a lone pelican either. At least not an American white pelican. Usually they're kind of in groups. So the time of year, everything seemed weird. We're like, okay, that's weird. And we kept driving. And then we found a prairie. And we set up for it on that horrible dirt road. That just nasty. Yeah. That like
still horrible to this day, by the way. We drove on it earlier this year. It was terrible.
20 years later, and it's just made out of potholes. They just took a bunch of potholes together, and it just like it'll rattle any vehicle, any Jeep, any ATV to its core. And we put out for a prairie. We're like, all right, let's turn around, and we're gonna back up, and then we look out, and as we came back, we're like, wait a minute, look out on the water there, out on that frozen water. There's the pelican. And you're like, yeah, and yes, it is, Ben. And I'm like, well, come on, let's go take a look at it. We gotta go see this pelican. And you're like, okay. Open up the door, and it starts slipping. And I'm like, John, it's injured. Something's wrong. I gotta get it. And I had this stupid in my head. It was like I don't know, like Crocodile Hunter. I'm a wildlife warrior. I'm gonna save this injured pelican, or something. I don't know what I was thinking in my head. But he starts running away, slipping all over the place on the frozen ice, and I'm like, I go
salt
charging
ice,
after
by
him,
the way,
and I'm like, and I go jumping over, and as I start coming down, my feet in the air, I'm like, I just picture, oh no, when I hit this ice, my foot's going to crash through, and I'm going to sink down into the depths and my hand's going to go through, and John's going to be like, no, Ben, he died the way he lived, running after pelicans, I mean,
it's partially right. I mean, he did go through the ice. It was a disaster.
And it was just like, and so it was like, at that point, it was like, 12 inches of icy water and then like 12 inches of icy mud. And so
salt, it was that nasty, like brackish,
salty,
disgusting
mud,
stinky,
methanated water, so gross. And so I keep running after it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to sink. So every step I'm breaking through the ice and sinking into mud.
I just can't stop laughing.
you were just like rolling with laughter over on the side.
Oh my gosh!
And the pelican finally gives up. And by the time I get to it, because every step I have to break through the ice, squish through the mud, but the water is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So by the time I reach this pelican, I'm at crotch level. Okay, so it's like crotch level with the ice. Smushed down in this mud. This pelican's hunkered down. American white pelicans are huge. They are big birds.
Huge.
And he looks so, he's injured, and I can see a little bit of red, so clearly there's some blood. Something's going on his wing, and I'm like, hey, buddy, don't worry. I'm gonna take care of you. We're gonna get you back. Get you some help.
Yeah, it was the opposite side wing than we were seeing. Like, we were seeing his right wing as he was going across, and it was the left wing.
It was the left that it was injured, yeah. Somebody had shot him with like some sort of shotgun shot because it was just a bunch of BBs. But we're used to raptors, you and I. It's like, okay, when you go out to a hawk on a trap, you're worried about the feet. Yeah, they can bite you, but the feet are what are dangerous. And so that's what you're looking at. So I'm looking at this pelican, and I reach both of my arms out towards him. And remember, we're eye to eye because I'm crotch level in this ice and water. I'm trapped. And I'm like, hey, buddy. And as I'm reaching, all of a sudden his head in slow motion comes at me. And just engulfs. And it's like, their mouths are huge. And it just like and swallows my head, and it just and everything goes dark, and I'm like, I'm a dead man. I'm dead. I am now dead. And then I hear this muffled laughter of John, and I'm like, wait. Is that the call of the angels ushering me into heaven? And it's like, no, it's John. I'm like, oh, I'm alive. And John won't stop laughing. And I figured it out.
I have tears.
But their beaks, a pelican's beak, the jawline itself, the bone itself can kind of expand a little, but the pouch underneath is just can hold
huge.
Volumes. It's huge.
It's
and
big.
So my face. So what's John's looking at is my butt sticking up in the air as I'm crotch deep in the ice with my head in the pouch of a pelican, and I'm not moving. I'm just like, the pouch must have been stretched in the shape of my face.
It looked like a head crab, like you had this like bird hanging off the face. It was
just like a cartoon.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was very cartoon-like, and
and so I reach around and I grab the head. It didn't hurt at all. No pain. They have no powerful grip whatsoever. They do have a sharp point to their beak, but that hadn't got me. I was just totally consumed my entire face. So I open the beak, pull my head out, put my hand around the upper and lower mandible, grab them, and
now he's trying to slog through this stuff, trying to control this huge bird. I mean, it was just so comical. I couldn't stop laughing.
And I think, memory can be bad, but I remember it at least being like 70 yards out into the ice,
it was a ways, man. It was probably about 70 yards. That's probably accurate.
And so I get all the way back. You're laughing your head off. I'm like, shut up, man. What are you laughing at? You're like, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, you think it was funny, huh? And you're like, yes, I do. And so I'm like, oh yeah. So I'm holding him, so I let go of the beak, and he lunges towards John, and he grabs John's head, but John's not trapped in the ice, so he can move away. So he pulls back, and that hook on the tip of the beak grabs his neck and cuts his neck open. Not the pelican itself, but the motion of him pulling away. So his neck's bleeding. He's like, you stupid pelican. So
it got me pretty good.
He did.
Like it drew blood. I mean, it was the back of my neck, not the front of my neck.
Yeah.
But,
you weren't gushing blood, but it was bleeding. And it hurts,
Gosh, it reeked in there.
That thing was so stinky.
You spent a lot more time in its gullet too.
But so then we're like, I'm like, John, you're like, and John just had like one of those the old type trucks where it's just like a bench seat across. So we're like, well, where do we do this? And John's like, how do we get it back? It's injured. We got to find a rehabber or something. And so we came up with this brilliant idea. He had a garbage bag. So I cut a hole in the garbage bag.
So we went to my apartment. That's what we went to get. I had garbage bags.
That's right.
I was trying to figure out how we ended out, because I remember coming out of the house with the garbage bag, and you were doing something, and its head was loose, and I ended up back in the gullet of this thing again.
That's because I had forgotten about that. Because we had to go.
That was why
the garbage bag. That was my brilliant idea. I was like, that's what we can do. So John got chomped on twice. So we cut a hole in the garbage bag, slid it over everything. We slid the head and neck through. So the head and neck are completely out of the bag, and we wrapped it around the bag.
Still dangerous, I might add. It's totally dangerous, even in a garbage bag.
Mm-hmm. But it was like, how do we safely kind of secure this thing in a way that doesn't inhibit breathing or anything, but it's also not pooping all over us while we're trying to drive. And so then I'm like, so we got home. You dropped me off at my house, and I was in a basement apartment, and I go down to my now ex-wife. This is not why she's my ex-wife, but where I'm like, start kicking the door. You never know. But I start kicking the door, and I'm like, open the door, and she's like, why is he kicking? So she locks the chain and then opens the door, looks at me, looks down at the pelican, looks back up at me, and just shakes her head.
I'm still laughing, by the way.
And you're still laughing.
Myself.
And eventually I got her to let me in, but we just, we had to go to because it was a weekend and we couldn't get a hold of a rehabber for several days. So we just bought fish from the Asian market because it was the only place open that had big fish to feed it. But yeah, that was it's crazy. So you never know what's going to happen when you're out trapping. You never know what you're going to encounter, what you're going to do.
Oh, so many things.
We have so many fun stories. I don't know. It's fun talking about them, though. It's fun, going over some of the funny stories. But the important thing is with trapping, it's always an adventure. But I think kind of the important thing is you always got to remember have your permits in place. If you have seasons in your area, be sure to be following those seasons. And if you encounter people who are negative, or if you have to talk to the police for any reason, just explain what you're doing, be diplomatic and kind about it, show them your permits, and just try to explain to people. And usually people are very understanding, and it can be a cool experience.
Yeah, make sure you have your permits on you. I was trapping a Cooper's hawk, family birds, this last year. We had a nest that was just down. It was at a church near my house, and the church, it's kind of it's my church, so it's someplace I'm familiar with, and I know that the people in charge would have no issue with me being there. So I go out and get this trap that Ben had built. It's this trap door trap. And I was kind of adjusting it to get it to work the right way, right? It was Ben had built it, but it hadn't really used it yet. So I got it adjusted and everything, and it was sitting out there, and the hawks were in the tree above it. So I'm sitting there with binoculars. Didn't even think about the fact that there was houses across the street. Uh-huh. And they're seeing this guy sitting in this big black Suburban with binoculars.
Yeah, like staring. What could he be staring at?
So it wasn't too long before I saw a police car turn down the road, and I'm like, I'm gonna have a cop behind my car in a second here. Yep, pulled right back. He came up the side. Always be kind to the police officers. They're just answering call to people. So I'm like, hey, officer, how's it going? And I'm like, somebody called that I was sitting out here, didn't they? He's like, yep. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, see that right over there? Explained the whole thing. It's a trap. I have a permit and everything. Then I realized my permits were at the house. I did actually have a good permit on me. My permits were still in our little, we have this basket which has all of our mail in it. Yeah. I mean, my house was a block away. I wasn't really worried about it. But I did have an active permit. It was my wife's permit. I showed it to him. He was totally cool. But I could have just drove down the street and gave him the right one. When you're out trapping, make sure you have your falconry license and your permit on you. But he was totally cool when he found out what I was doing. He was more interested in what I was doing than caring about, what the call was for. Because as soon as he talked to me, he realized the call was bunk. Uh-huh. So they contacted the person and said, oh, he's fine. He's trapping under a legal permit. You're just ignore him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so it's easy to make mistakes. We all do. It's no different than you could have your plates expire on your car or accidentally leave your wallet at home and you don't have your driver's license with you. So, but it's important to have your ducks in a row and do things right, and again, be diplomatic, and then have some fun stories along the way. But yeah, we just thought we'd share a couple of fun stories tonight. Maybe we'll share some more stories in the future if people enjoy that. It's fun. It's just fun to casual. Like I said, we enjoy doing this. Of just sharing some memories and sharing some tips on falconry. It's just a couple of friends shooting the breeze and talking about what we love.
Absolutely.
But we hope you enjoyed listening today. Also, remember, be sure to check out John's YouTube channel, Falcon's Ledge. And tune in next time for our next podcast. And as always, happy hawking.